Okay, here's a question that sounds pretty simple on the surface, but when you start to pull on that thread, it unravels the entire modern economy. If every country on Earth is in debt, who exactly are they borrowing from? Who holds the IOU for the whole world? We're about to unpack one of the biggest and maybe most important puzzles in all of finance.
So let's just start with this number. It is almost impossible to really wrap your head around it. $317 trillion. That is the total mountain of debt owed by every single government, corporation, and household on this planet. It is a truly mind-boggling figure.
But what does a number that big even mean? We'll try this on for size. It's more than 3 times the value of everything the entire world produces and sells in a single year. Think about that. To pay it all back, we would have to take every dollar from every economy on the planet for more than 3 years straight, with nobody spending a single cent on food or housing or anything.
And that brings us right back to the central riddle. The United States owes trillions. China owes trillions. Japan, Germany, Brazil, you name it, they are all borrowers. So if debt is a two-way street, for every borrower there has to be a lender, who is on the other side of that $317 trillion transaction? Who actually owns all that debt? Let's start peeling back the layers.
Well, the first answer is, believe it or not, surprisingly close to home. You see, for most countries, the biggest creditor is often the country itself. Yeah, I know, it sounds like a paradox, but let's take a look at how that actually works.
Let's just use the US as a perfect example. A huge 70% of all US public debt is held domestically. That means American citizens and American institutions are the #1 lenders to the American government. Only about 30% is actually held by other countries or foreign investors.
So who exactly are these domestic holders? Well, there's a very good chance it's you, in a roundabout way. When you put your savings in a bank, that money doesn't just sit in a vault. The bank turns around and invests it, and a super safe way to do that is by buying government bonds. It's the same story for the money in your pension fund or the premiums you pay to an insurance company. These big institutions are some of the largest buyers of government debt. So, in a very real sense, the citizens are lending money to their own government.
In this quote just nails it. Global debt isn't some simple line from a lender to a borrower. It's this massive, tangled web. A circular system where a country borrows from its own citizens' savings to pay for things, and in return, those citizens get a steady stream of interest. It really is like a flywheel, just constantly spinning money through the economy.
But okay, that's just layer 1 of the onion. To get the full picture, we've got to zoom out and look at the major global groups of creditors, the ones who operate across borders. So let's dig into that deeper answer.
According to the analysis, the world's creditors can pretty much be sorted into 4 main buckets. You've got central banks, like the US Federal Reserve. You've got enormous institutional investors. You've got other governments who buy debt to hold as foreign currency reserves. And finally, you have very wealthy private individuals. And the scale of these institutional investors is just wow. If you add them all up, pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, they are holding around $120 trillion in global debt. Because these are the groups managing a retirement savings of millions of everyday people. They are by far the single largest category of debt holders on the planet. Now, here's a really critical point from the Bank for International Settlements. They make a distinction between who holds debt on average and who is buying the new debt when a government needs to borrow even more. And their research is pretty striking. These so-called non-bank investors, like mutual funds and hedge funds, are snapping up a massive 69% of all new debt. That makes them the most important buyers in the market, the ones setting the price. And, you know, this creditor mix looks totally different depending on where you are in the world. World Bank data tells 2 completely different stories here. For a country like the Philippines, private creditors, mostly bondholders, own about 76% of its debt. But then you look at a country like Angola, and over half of its debt is owed to multilateral institutions, organizations like the World Bank and the IMF. It just goes to show you there's no single simple answer to who the lender is.
Okay, so now we come to a third perspective. This one argues that the system we've been describing isn't some neutral flywheel at all, but something else. The argument is that the structure of modern debt isn't an accident, it's a design. The whole core of this argument is that the system has a kind of mathematical trap built right into its DNA. Here's the basic logic behind that thinking.
So the idea goes like this. When a government borrows money, let's say $100, that $100, the principal, is created and enters the economy. But the government now owes back, say, $105 with interest. The problem is that extra $5 needed to pay the interest was never created. So according to this reasoning, the only way for the government to find that extra $5 is to borrow it from somewhere else, which kicks off a whole new cycle of debt.
This basically guarantees that the total amount of debt has to grow forever just to keep the system from collapsing.
And what's the outcome of this perpetual debt machine? A perpetual massive flow of interest payments. Every single year, a staggering $15 trillion flows from all the borrowers, that's governments, companies, and regular households, to the lenders who hold all that debt.
And this is where the wealth concentration argument really comes into focus. The analysis suggests that these interest payments are incredibly concentrated. The top 1% of the world's population is estimated to capture about 40% of all that interest income. And it gets even more extreme the higher you go, with the top 0.01% taking in 10% of that entire $15 trillion pie. So you can see how this system can act like a giant, powerful funnel for wealth.
All right, so where does all this leave us? We've got the simple answer, the deeper systematic one, and this really controversial view. Let's try to pull all these pieces together.
So you've really got two ways of looking at the exact same system. On one hand, you have the flywheel view. That is a necessary tool, this complex web that keeps our economy going by connecting people who save with people who need to borrow. Then, on the other hand, you have the funnel view. That same system is actually a machine designed to pull wealth from the bottom to the top through these unavoidable, never-ending interest payments. Both are describing the same reality, just from completely different angles.
So what's the final takeaway here? Who is the lender? In one sense, it's everyone. The ownership of that debt is spread out across millions of pension funds, banks, and regular people. But the benefits of that system, those massive interest payments, are highly concentrated right at the very top. So the ownership is broad, but the rewards are incredibly narrow.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this massive, always growing mountain of debt the essential flywheel that keeps our modern world running? Or is it a funnel, creating a level of inequality that just can't last? A ticking time bomb just waiting to go off? That is the $317 trillion question to think about.